Picture someone you love. Now imagine they start screaming at nothing, tearing at their own skin, convinced that an invisible force is speaking directly into their skull. You don't know what's wrong. There's no hospital, no medication, no diagnosis, no framework that even allows for the concept of a brain that malfunctions. What do you do? For most of human history, this was a real situation with no real answer. And the solutions people came up with, before science, before psychology, before anyone understood what the brain even was, are stranger, darker, and more human than anything you'd expect. Let's start with what mental illness actually looked like in the ancient world, because nobody called it that. There was no category called mental illness. There was no distinction between a sick mind and a possessed one. If your behavior became strange, if you heard things, saw things, stopped eating, couldn't leave your bed, wept without stopping, the explanation was always the same. Something outside you had entered. A spirit, a god, a curse, a demon. The suffering was real. The cause, everyone agreed, was supernatural. This wasn't ignorance. It was the only logical conclusion available with the information they had. A broken leg you could see. A broken mind you couldn't. If something invisible was making you act that way, an invisible cause made perfect sense. The oldest evidence of humans attempting to treat mental illness dates back roughly 7,000 years. Archaeologists have found skulls from Neolithic Europe with holes deliberately drilled into them. Clean, careful holes. Edges that show signs of healing, meaning the person survived the procedure and lived for months or years afterward. This was trepanation, and it was practiced on every inhabited continent independently. Europe, South America, Africa, Asia, no contact between these cultures. Same exact solution. The theory was simple. If something had gotten inside, you made a door for it to leave. What's remarkable isn't that they tried this, it's that some of it may have accidentally worked. Trepanation can relieve pressure from certain brain injuries. A person who suffered a head trauma and developed behavioral changes, aggression, confusion, seizures, might genuinely improve after the procedure. Not because the demon left, because the pressure did. They solved the right problem for the completely wrong reason. Now, let's talk about what happened when drilling a hole didn't fix it. In ancient Mesopotamia, around 2000 BCE, Babylonian physicians had a sophisticated classification system for mental disturbance. They identified distinct patterns, what we might now recognize as depression, mania, psychosis, and anxiety, and they named them by which deity or demon was responsible. Each had a corresponding ritual, a specific incantation, a particular herb burned at a particular time of night. Here's the thing modern people miss about this. The ritual itself wasn't useless. Gathering a sick person's community, performing a structured ceremony, giving the suffering person a role, the afflicted one, the one being healed, and surrounding them with people who believed the healing was happening. That's not medicine in the modern sense, but it's also not nothing. What we now call social support, community intervention, and the placebo effect were all baked into the ritual, whether anyone understood that or not. Ancient Egypt took a different approach. The Ebers Papyrus, written around 1550 BCE, contains what may be the earliest written description of depression. They called it a heaviness of the heart. Their treatment did not involve exorcism or surgery. It involved music, conversation, travel, returning the person to sunlight and other people, rest, connection, and stimulation. Interventions that a modern psychiatrist would not entirely dismiss. In ancient Greece, something shifted. Hippocrates, around 400 BCE, made an argument that was radical for his time. Mental disturbance came from the body, not the gods. Specifically, from imbalances in 4 fluids he called humors. Black bile caused melancholia. Yellow bile caused anxiety and agitation. The treatments followed the theory. Diet, exercise, cold baths, herbs, rest. Wrong about the mechanism, surprisingly right about the intervention. He also made one observation that stood untouched for centuries. He noted that some patients improved and relapsed in patterns, that the illness had phases, that it came and went regardless of what was done. This was the first recorded acknowledgement that mental illness might simply be something that happens to a person, not something they invited or deserve. That idea almost immediately got buried. By the medieval period, Europe had reverted. The church held that madness was either divine punishment or demonic possession. Treatment meant confession, prayer, and if the behavior was severe enough, restraint. The first asylums in the 13th and 14th centuries were not hospitals. They were cages, places to put people who frightened the community. Bethlem Royal Hospital in London, established in 1247, became so synonymous with chaos and suffering that its name entered the English language as the word we still use today. Bedlam. But even here, something was happening elsewhere. The Islamic world had taken Hippocrates seriously and kept building. By the 9th century, Persian physician Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi was running what we would recognize as a psychiatric ward. In Baghdad, patients were not chained, they were observed. Their symptoms were recorded. Treatments included structured conversation, music, purposeful work, and social engagement. He believed 1,000 years before Western medicine agreed that the mind and body were connected, and that both required care. Europe would not arrive at those conclusions for another 800 years. So here's what all of this adds up to. For most of human history, mental illness was treated with the best tools available. Those tools were almost never the right ones. But they were rarely purely cruel. Trepanation stumbled into neurosurgery. Babylonian ritual stumbled into community therapy. Egyptian physicians stumbled into lifestyle medicine. Nobody had the full picture, but almost every culture in every era independently arrived at the same core instinct. The person suffering needed to be surrounded, witnessed, given a framework that made their pain feel meaningful, given a role in their own healing. That instinct was not wrong. It was, in fact, the most important thing. And we know this because modern psychiatry, with all its imaging and molecules and clinical trials, keeps circling back to the same conclusion. Medication helps, but connection helps more. Structure helps. Meaning helps. Being seen by people who are trying, even when they don't fully understand, helps. They didn't have the science, but they had the instinct. And in the absence of everything else, the instinct was enough to keep people alive, keep communities intact, and pass down generation by generation the stubborn human belief that a broken mind was worth trying to fix. We just spent 7,000 years learning how.